During family dinner, my mom raised her glass and said, "To my real son, the one who actually made something of himself." My brother smirked. My dad nodded. I stayed silent until I slid the deed across the table and watched their faces fall one by one. I never thought I'd come back to this place. But there I was, standing in front of the same beat-up gas station that smelled of burnt coffee and rubber, just like it did when I was 17. The cracked sign still buzzed faintly, and I could almost hear my old manager's voice yelling at me to refill the windshield fluid display. "My name is Nolan. I'm 28 now, an entrepreneur living in Denver, but this gas station was the first step on my way out of the suffocating life I had back home. Back then, all I wanted was to escape. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the kid who sat at the dinner table, invisible, while the spotlight was glued to my brother, Carter. Carter was the golden boy of our family, our dad's pride and mom's constant obsession. He was a mechanic who could turn a rusted-out shell into something that roared down the road like it belonged in a car show. The whole town adored him. They'd gather at the auto shop on Friday nights just to watch Carter run drag races behind the building. I was just there. I kept my head down, got good grades, and stayed out of trouble. None of it mattered. If Carter won a race, Dad would clap him on the back and call him a genius. When I brought home an A, Dad just muttered, "Good. Now help your brother in the garage." Mom wasn't much different. She babied Carter like he was still 6 years old, baking him his favorite pie whenever he felt down, bragging about his every little achievement. Meanwhile, if I asked for a ride to a school event, she'd sigh like I was asking her to drive cross-country. I used to lie awake at night wondering what it would take to make them see me. Not just look at me, but really see me. The closest I ever got to rebellion was when I told them I wanted to study industrial design in college. I remember that dinner so clearly. Dad put his fork down and stared like I'd just told him I wanted to be a clown. "Industrial design? What even is that?" he asked. "It's like product design," I said, my voice cracking a little. "I want to build things, real things. Furniture, electronics." Mom laughed, actually laughed. "So, arts and crafts for grown-ups? Nolan, you're wasting your time. You should go into something real, like what Carter's doing." A month later, Carter graduated from trade school, and my parents threw a backyard party so big it looked like the whole county showed up. For me, no party, not even a cake. The moment I realized I had to leave came on my 19th birthday. We went out to dinner, and I sat there in silence as Carter opened gift after gift, none of which were for me. When Mom finally remembered why we were out, she said, "Oh, happy birthday, Nolan," and gave me this look like she had something wise to say. "One day," she added with a smirk, "you'll understand what real work looks like." Real work. That was it. I went back to my room that night, packed 2 bags, and walked out the next morning. No yelling. No dramatic goodbyes. I just left. That was almost 10 years ago. Standing outside that gas station now, I could still feel the sting of that night like it just happened. I thought I'd buried all that resentment, but coming back stirred it all up again. I leaned against my car, staring at the station's dirty windows. I wasn't the overlooked kid anymore. I'd built something on my own, something real, even if my parents never cared to ask about it. But no amount of success had ever erased the feeling that, to them, I'd always be second place. And deep down, I wasn't sure I'd ever forgive them for that. The text came out of nowhere, like a ghost crawling out of my past. "Dad, you coming home for Founders Day dinner?" That was it. No hello. No, how have you been? Just that flat, presumptuous question. 10 years of silence. And suddenly I was supposed to show up like nothing happened? I stared at my phone for a long time. My first instinct was to delete the message. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the small, bitter part of me that wanted them to see the man I'd become, the man they never believed I could be. I typed back a single word, "Sure." The drive to my hometown felt like slipping into an old shirt that didn't fit anymore. The roads were the same, lined with rusty mailboxes and crooked fences, but I saw everything differently now. Back then, I was a kid desperate to leave. Now, I was coming back with a bank account full of hard-earned success and a company that turned sketches into products people actually wanted to buy. I didn't tell anyone about the firm. I didn't tell them about my team of 20 employees or the big-name clients who relied on me. They didn't deserve to know. When I passed Carter's auto shop, the memories hit hard. The place looked bigger now, with new signage and a row of custom motorcycles out front. I could almost see him leaning against the garage door, beer in hand, surrounded by his friends like some small-town rock star. I used to watch from the shadows, hoping he'd let me hang out for once. He never did. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sun was low and the house looked smaller than I remembered. The siding was faded, the porch creaked under my feet, but the place still smelled like home, motor oil and Mom's cheap lavender candles. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom smiled wide and pulled me into a hug, but it felt stiff, rehearsed. She smelled like the same floral perfume she wore when I was a kid. "You look good," she said, her eyes skimming over me like she was checking for something to criticize. "Thanks," I replied, my voice even. Carter was leaning on the porch railing, a craft beer dangling from his hand. He didn't bother coming down the steps. Instead, he gave me this smirk, half amusement, half annoyance. "Look who finally decided to show up," he said. I nodded at him, but didn't bother replying. There was nothing to say. We both knew exactly how this night was going to feel. Inside, the house hadn't changed much. The same old family photos lined the walls. Carter in his racing gear, Carter holding trophies, Carter grinning next to Dad's prized truck. There wasn't a single photo of me past middle school. I wondered if they even noticed. Mom fussed over the table, straightening plates, and Dad gave me a nod from his recliner. No warm welcome. No apology for years of silence. Just business as usual. I sat down, quiet and steady, bracing myself. I wasn't here for their approval. Not anymore. I was here for something else, a kind of closure I wasn't sure I'd find. The dining room was crowded, louder than I expected. Distant cousins I barely remembered filled every seat, their voices overlapping like a swarm of bees. The air smelled like roast beef and garlic bread, but the only thing I could taste was the old tension settling in my chest. I ended up at the corner of the table, squeezed into a flimsy folding chair that wobbled every time I shifted my weight. Carter, of course, was at the center, holding court like a king. He was telling some exaggerated story about a custom bike build he'd done for a local country singer. Everyone hung on his every word. He saw it on Instagram and drove 3 hours just to get me to do the work, Carter boasted, his hand gesturing like he was a celebrity himself. Said nobody else could get the look right. That's what happens when you're the best. A round of laughter and applause rippled through the room. I kept my eyes on my plate, picking at a slice of overcooked ham. I'd done a few design projects for companies 10 times bigger than Carter's clients, but no one here would care about that. They never did. Across the table, Dad raised his glass. "To Carter," he said proudly. "The kid who stayed loyal to this town. The one who never forgot where he came from." The room filled with cheers, and someone clinked their fork against a glass. Carter grinned like he'd just won an award. I forced a polite smile, my hand tightening around my water glass until my knuckles turned white. Mom stood up, glass in hand, her voice cutting through the noise. "And let's not forget," she said with a sly smile, "the real son who stayed true to this family, who never thought he was too good for us." She looked directly at Carter as she said it, but I felt the weight of the dig sink into me like a knife. There was a hush, just a slight pause that made me feel like the entire room was watching me, waiting for a reaction. My heart thudded, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. The room went quiet as I slid it across the table toward Carter. He frowned. "What's this?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Open it," I said, my tone calm but sharp enough to cut the silence. Carter tore the envelope open, pulling out a single folded document. His eyes scanned the page, and for the first time all night, his smug grin disappeared. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Dad leaned forward. "What's going on?" I leaned back in my wobbly chair, my face unreadable. "It's the deed," I said evenly. "To this house. I bought it 3 months ago when it went into foreclosure." For a moment, no one said a word. It was like the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. "You're lying," Mom said finally, her voice shaking. "This is our house." I corrected. "You missed the notices, I guess. I followed the paper trail while you were all too busy throwing parties and posting about Carter's latest TV appearance." The room erupted. Voices clashing, chairs scraping against the floor. Carter slammed the paper down on the table. "This is some kind of sick joke," he barked. "You think you can just come back here and—" "I don't think," I cut in sharply. I did. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Even the kids at the far end of the table stopped whispering. I took a slow sip of water and let the moment sit. For years, I had been the quiet one, the one they could ignore. Not anymore. Tonight, I wanted them to see me, not as the invisible son, but as the man who now owned the very ground beneath their feet. The dining room, once loud with laughter, now felt like a powder keg. Carter stared at the deed like it was a personal insult. His face turned red, his jaw tightening as if he was about to explode. "This is a joke," he snapped. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? Who even does that?" I folded my hands on the table, keeping my voice calm. "Someone who pays attention. Someone who doesn't sit back and watch everything crumble." Dad stood up, his chair screeching against the hardwood. "You're telling me you bought this house? Our house?" "Yes," I said. "I followed the foreclosure notice when it went public. It wasn't hard. You missed 2 payments, then 3. I took care of it. Mom's face was pale. You did this behind our backs. Her voice shook. How could you? How could I? I leaned forward, feeling something dark and heavy rise in my chest. You're angry at me for paying attention to something you ignored. Do you even hear yourselves? Carter slammed his hand on the table, rattling the glasses. You think this makes you better than us? You're just spiteful, Nolan. Always have been. You couldn't stand being in my shadow, so now you're trying to buy your way into some kind of victory. I laughed, cold, humorless. Funny. I don't remember being in your shadow. I remember being invisible. The room fell quiet again, but I wasn't done. Not anymore. You all spent years pretending I didn't exist, I continued, my voice rising. Dad, every time I came home with good news, you shrugged like it didn't matter. Mom, you went out of your way to make sure Carter got the attention while I got, what? A pat on the back? A snide remark about how I'd never understand real work? That's not true, Mom whispered. Isn't it? I shot back. Do you remember my 19th birthday? Because I do. I remember sitting at that restaurant with no gift, no card, and you telling me I'd understand what real work looks like one day. Mom's lip trembled. We didn't mean. Don't, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut her off. You did mean it. You meant every word. And now that I've built something real, you all suddenly care about what I've done? No, not anymore. Carter sneered, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You're just trying to tear this family apart. That's all you're doing. No, I said quietly but firmly. I'm reminding you that I'm not the failure you wanted me to be. You didn't raise a screw-up, Carter. You raised a man who didn't need your approval to make something better than any of this. Dad's face hardened, like he didn't know whether to yell or stay silent. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I stood, the folding chair creaking behind me. You don't have to like it, but this is reality now. I own this house, and I'm done pretending I don't have a voice here. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of Carter's beer bottle clinking as he set it down too hard on the table. Mom looked like she wanted to cry, but I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet kid waiting for a scrap of recognition. I was the one holding all the cards. The shouting had died down, but the tension hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Carter glared at me across the table, his face flushed with anger. Mom looked as if someone had punched her in the stomach, and Dad stood off to the side, his arms crossed, as if waiting for me to take back everything I'd just said. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket again and pulled out a small black electronic key fob, the kind used for gated driveways. I placed it in the center of the table. The faint clink of plastic against wood cut through the silence. What's that supposed to be? Carter sneered. I let a pause linger before answering. That, I said, is the gate key. The one for the house. Mom's brows knitted together. The house? What are you talking about? I leaned back, letting them squirm for a moment. I set up a trust, I said. The house isn't just mine anymore. I've already named a beneficiary. Carter snorted. Yeah, right. Let me guess. You're leaving it to yourself? You love the drama, don't you? No, I said, my eyes locking on the one person in the room who had gone silent this whole time. I'm leaving it to her. I pointed across the table, to Abby. Abby, my younger cousin, sat there frozen, her hands clutching her napkin like it was a lifeline. She was the quiet daughter of my mom's estranged sister. Growing up, she was the only person who ever treated me like I mattered. She'd sit with me on the porch during those loud family barbecues when everyone else was too busy cheering for Carter's latest stunt. She saw me before anyone else did. Abby's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Wait, what? Mom's voice was sharp with disbelief. Nolan, that's ridiculous. She's just a kid. She's 22, I said calmly. She's more grown up than anyone at this table. And she's the only one who's ever made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Abby blinked, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. I don't understand. Why me? I looked at her, and for once, I let myself smile. Because you said once you didn't want to disappear. Now you don't have to. This house, it's yours. You can live here, sell it, rebuild it, whatever you want. It's yours. The room erupted. You've lost your damn mind, Carter shouted. You can't just give away our house to some cousin. Our house, I said, leaning forward. You mean the house I legally own? The one you all let slide into foreclosure because you were too busy drinking craft beer and talking about your TV appearances? Mom slammed her palm on the table. This is spite, Nolan. Pure spite. No, I said softly. This is clarity. Abby looked like she might cry. I don't know if I can take it, she whispered. Yes, you can, I told her gently. You don't owe them anything. You're the one person in this family who gave me kindness when no one else could bother. This is me giving it back. Mom was shaking her head, muttering under her breath, but I didn't care. I saw Abby's trembling hands reach out toward the key fob, her fingers brushing against it like she wasn't sure it was real. It's real, I said. And it's yours. The moment Abby's fingers closed around the key fob, the room erupted like a volcano. You can't do this, Mom shouted, her voice cracking with fury. This is our family home, Nolan. Your father and I built our lives here. Built. I interrupted. You let it rot until the bank came knocking. I didn't steal it from you. I saved it when you didn't care enough to. Dad finally spoke, his tone low and stern. You think this is respect? You think this is how family treats family? I met his glare without flinching. You want to talk about respect? Where was it when I left home with 2 bags and not even a goodbye? Where was it when Mom laughed at my degree? When you both acted like my only worth was how fast I could change Carter's oil? Carter jumped in, slamming his beer bottle down so hard it tipped over. This is pathetic, Nolan. You're acting like a bitter little kid who never got enough hugs. So what? You made some money and think you can rub it in everyone's face. I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. It's not about the money, Carter. It's about the fact that none of you ever cared until you realized I had something you wanted. You only see me now because I have leverage. Mom looked panicked. Leverage? We're your parents. We raised you, Nolan. You raised me to feel invisible. I shot back. To believe my worth was less than Carter's, no matter what I did. Well, guess what? You didn't raise a failure. You raised a man who learned not to need your approval to build something better. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought Mom might cry, but she just stared at me like I'd become someone she didn't recognize. Maybe I had. Dad's voice softened, a last-ditch attempt. Son, look, we made mistakes. But this is tearing the family apart. You don't have to do this. I shook my head. No, you did that years ago, every time you ignored me, every time you dismissed me. I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm just not pretending anymore. Carter scoffed. God, you sound so self-righteous. You're just enjoying this, aren't you? I stared at him. Enjoying it. No, I'm done with it. I'm done being the shadow in your spotlight. And if that means this family hates me for finally standing up, so be it. The table was silent. Abby sat frozen, the key fob still in her hand. She looked at me with something like awe, or maybe fear, unsure if she was witnessing my victory or the family's final collapse. I stood, pushing my chair back. I think we're done here, I said quietly. As I walked toward the door, voices started to swirl behind me. Angry, desperate, panicked. But I didn't turn around. Then, just as my hand touched the doorknob, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. Nolan. I froze. It was my grandmother. I turned slowly, my hand still on the doorknob. My grandmother was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, her posture slightly stooped, but her gaze sharp and unwavering. I hadn't even realized she was here. She must have been sitting quietly in the den, listening to every word. The room fell silent the moment she spoke again. Nolan, sit down. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that made Carter lean back in his chair and Mom's mouth snap shut. Even Dad, who never let anyone tell him what to do, lowered his eyes. I hesitated, my chest tight, then pulled the chair back and sat. Grandma stepped forward slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. She wore a simple navy sweater and a pair of glasses that sat low on her nose. I remembered being a kid, sitting at her kitchen table while she told stories about working 2 jobs just to keep the family afloat. She never said much at family gatherings anymore, but when she did, everyone listened. I've been quiet too long, she said, her gaze sweeping across the table. I've watched all of you treat Nolan like a ghost. Like he's nothing. And I stayed silent because I thought maybe you'd see him for who he is. But tonight, I see I was wrong. Mom's voice cracked. Mom, don't. Don't interrupt me, Linda. Grandma snapped, her tone so sharp that Mom flinched. You and your husband have been blind. Completely blind. You worship Carter like he's the second coming, while your other son worked his fingers to the bone just to make something of himself. And did you ever once, just once, tell him you were proud? Mom's face went red, her lips trembling. Of course I'm proud of him. Then why didn't he know it? Grandma shot back. Why is he sitting there like a stranger in his own family? Dad shifted uncomfortably, but Grandma wasn't finished. She turned to Carter. And you? Oh, don't give me that look, Carter. You've had your parents wrapped around your little finger since you were 10. Every mistake you made, they excused it. Every victory, they treated like it was gold. And you let them treat Nolan like he was nothing. Carter muttered something under his breath, but Grandma's glare cut him off. Then she looked at me, and her expression softened. You remind me of your grandfather, she said quietly. He left this town with nothing but a duffel bag, worked his way up, and never once asked for permission to be proud of who he was. You did the same, Nolan. And I've been watching. I've seen the man you've become. You don't need their validation, but you deserve their respect. Something tightened in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until now. Grandma reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table to me. I sold the cabin last month, she said. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There's $250,000 in that check, and I want you to have it. The room exploded in protest. Mom, you can't just give that to him. Mom shouted, her voice shrill. Why not? Grandma said, her tone calm but firm. I'd rather give it to the one person who actually earned my respect than watch the rest of you tear each other apart. Carter shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. This is insane. You're just encouraging him to. To what? Grandma cut in, her voice rising. To stop letting all of you treat him like dirt? Good. He should have done it years ago. She turned back to me and placed her hand gently over mine. Take Abby and go, Nolan. There's nothing left for you here. These jackals don't deserve your kindness. For the first time all night, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Grandma saw me. Really saw me. And that was enough. The room was still buzzing with protests, but I didn't hear them anymore. Grandma's words were still ringing in my ears. Steady, clear, final. She had handed me something I'd never gotten from anyone in this family. Validation. I stood, sliding the envelope with her check into my pocket. Abby was still sitting frozen, her eyes wide, the gate key resting in her palm like it weighed 100 pounds. I placed my hand on her shoulder. Come on, I said quietly. She looked up at me, uncertain. Are you sure? Yes, I said. You don't have to stay here and listen to this. Neither do I. Carter muttered something under his breath, but I didn't even glance at him. Mom's voice trembled as I walked past her. Nolan, you can't just walk out like this. This is still your family. I stopped at the doorway and turned to face her one last time. Family doesn't treat you like a stranger until they want something. Family doesn't make you feel invisible. I took a breath. I'm done looking for a place at this table. I don't need it anymore. Her face crumpled, but I didn't wait for her reply. I opened the door, and Abby followed me out. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time all evening, I felt like I could breathe. Behind us, voices were still raised, muffled by the walls, but none of it mattered. That house didn't hold any power over me now. Abby walked beside me down the porch steps, gripping the key fob like it might disappear if she let go. I still don't get it, she said softly. Why me? You could have kept it, Nolan. You earned it. I stopped at my car and looked at her, the porch light catching the tears in her eyes. Because you saw me before anyone else did, I said. When I was 17 and working at that gas station, you were the only one who asked me how I was doing. You were the only one who didn't treat me like I was a shadow standing next to Carter. I never forgot that. Her lip trembled, and for a second, I thought she might cry. I don't know if I deserve this, she whispered. You do, I said firmly. And you'll figure out what to do with it. Live there, sell it, rebuild it. Whatever you want, it's yours now, not theirs. We stood there for a moment, the winter air cutting through the tension like a knife. As we got into my car, a strange calm settled over me. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the faint glow of the house behind us, the silhouettes of people still arguing inside. But it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a chapter one had finally closed. Snowflakes began to fall as I started the engine, soft and quiet, like the world itself was giving me permission to let go. For the first time, I said, half to Abby and half to myself, I feel like I'm walking towards something, not away from it. She nodded, and for the first time that night, we both smiled.